Excellent, excellent.
And Jamaica, nice.
Canada in the building.
Okay,
right.
Sweden.
Sweden.
All the way to Sweden, Canada, Ohio. Okay.
Ohio, wow.
All right. So
All right. Brazil, welcome. Okay. So the last time when it was interrupted, we were kind of diving deep into the negative stigma and also telling a bit about our own journey, or Verona, you were actually telling how you started. So for today, we thought we just talked about the negative stigma again shortly, and then tell the audience about your journey again, how you started African spirituality. So also the challenges maybe when you started that you faced, and then we want to end this session with giving a few tips of where to start when you want to learn more about this topic. So yeah, I hand over to you about like why is there this negative stigma of it being so dangerous. And so what I actually realized, it's either it's very scary and dangerous, or it's kind of ridicule, like it's not so serious, like nothing serious. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about where this is coming from.
Yeah, I don't mind. You go ahead. Yeah, well, I think last time I was just, if I remember correctly, we were talking about the stigma not even being necessarily relevant, but that it's more like a tactic of war. Because when you read the European records, you find that particularly in Jamaica, they had identified that if you killed the spiritual counselors to the people who rebel, it demoralizes the whole movement. So killing the spiritual counselor became a tactic of war, you know, and that's how, according to the European records, this is not me making it up. You can look him up. His name is Edward Long. He talks about killing the spiritual counselors because they hold a lot of weight. So if they want to quell rebellions from the enslaved Africans, the first thing they should do is seek out these spiritual gifted people and eliminate them. So at the same time, this is when you realize they start to pass the law, which they call the Obia Act, which becomes a law that makes illegal all forms of African spiritual practices and philosophies, if you will, you know. So we can see that it's really just a political ploy. It has nothing from, if we want to even consider the idea of it being righteous or religious, no, there's nothing it didn't come from the religious space. It came from a political and military space, you know, where we see the same when America occupied Haiti. That's when we started seeing a lot of these films about voodoo, you know, you see them, a whole heap of black and white pictures that were made roughly coinciding with the time when America also then occupied Haiti. So we can see that as a tactic of war, you know. Yeah, so it's not negative in itself. It's just a way that they falsified ideas around it so that people don't want to know even what it's actually about.
Yeah, thanks again.
Some people are actually also commenting on the chat, if I can say so, and they are definitely aligned with you, saying like it's a spiritual warfare.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And some people are saying it's coming from the colonialism is one of the reasons as well for the stigma, even in Africa where foreigner religion are more popular.
Exactly.
Yes.
Maybe
definitely.
just on that note, just a little bit about that, because like what we can also kind of observe is that other religions are more accepted than our own. So maybe the connection of how like it was a warfare, everything was like African spirituality was demonized, and how did then turn around into like Christianity or other religions being more accepted than our own. Just to give a bit of insight about that, and then
okay, as in if you repeat that question for us, because...
Yeah, as into the process of, you know, from the negative stigma, and then, but it was not just portraying it negatively, but it came with an agenda of then imposing another religion or other things on us as well.
Yes,
So
yes.
and I think the reason was that we were, or the what my interpretation would be is like the reason would be to get us to accept everything else apart from our own. Or how would you see this?
Yeah. No, again, if we look in the colonial records, going to Ghana, for instance, because that I can attest as a fact, you know, people who changed from African traditional ways and became, say, Christian or Muslim, they were the ones who were given jobs, in a sense, yeah. So in some cases, you know, people had to come out with their should we say their entire traditional lineage and burn them in public spaces in front of the whole community to show that, okay, we've cut ourselves from this backward practice and we're now civilized human beings. But again, when we look at the religion that are foreign, you realize that a religion is not just an ideology. It's also a way of life. You know, there are particular things they will ask of you to do, ways to speak, ways to behave, the things you should think about. So it totally changes you as a person. You know, it's a full body wash, if you will. Yeah, brain, not just your body, but everything about you. So accepting that, you then become a caricature of a European. You know, you're like a second copy. You know, but then you can never be a full copy, and then you've also lost who you also really are. So you're in a very dangerous position. Yeah, beyond limbo.
Okay.
Yeah.
To add on to what Dalian said, obviously he's identified that this was a strategic strategy that was put in over several years. We haven't come to this place just randomly. This is something that's been planned and thought out and implemented for so long. And what we've seen here from his example is this person could see that this knowledge and spiritual understanding was used for rebellion purposes. So it gave people strength, it gave people power. It was a source of energy that existed within them that allowed them to fight off their oppressors. So now what they've strategically done is moved into other forms. So it's projected by the media, as Alia mentioned. You'll see Hollywood movies that, you know, show voodoo and make it really scary and something that you should stay away from. And then in addition to that, we also have from other religious organizations and institutions also speaking badly about African spiritual traditions and saying it's, you know, devil worship and something to stay away from. So a lot of us have even internalized the negativity within our very own homes as well. So it's something that is constantly repeated in various aspects of society to the point where we internalize it so deeply that many of us never even look towards African spirituality as an idea or as an alternative philosophy, because most people are so conditioned by the idea it's negative. But if we go to the actual core of African spiritual philosophy, it's the understanding that your ancestors and your lineage are all part of you. They exist within your DNA, and that is your power source. So by even disconnecting us from that just one tenet allows us to be spiritually vulnerable every single time we step out of the house. It's like we're walking around naked. We've lost our spiritual armor. That understanding in itself is our protection, and that's why ancestral reverence is so important.
Yeah. Wow. On point. On point. Thank you.
Definitely on point. For me, what I like to know from you guys is trying to break down a little bit and going back to some concept or example of what you are saying. Like, we know that African spirituality sometimes is taken as a superstition, you know, but there is some concept into the African spirituality that demonstrate the opposite. So could you probably give us 2 or 3 examples to show actually to the audience, especially some beginners, why African spirituality is not at all something evil or negative or something like that?
Okay. Yeah. Well, 2, 3 examples. there's loads of examples. Yeah, we have to limit it in some regard. But I think one of the obviously many things that we could look at, I would say, starts off first of all with we'll look at we'll pick up a couple of scientific ideas that are floating around these days. You know, now if you look in places like quantum science, they refer to the human body as a planetary force now. And the reason that they make this distinction now is with the knowledge that in your human, as a human being, yeah, you're made up of obviously many things. One of them being the very elements that make up the universe. So the hydrogen, oxygen, and so on. And in African traditions, we also know that what they call a human being is seen as a spirit, because this is the term of reference there. That term spirit denotes that you're not just a physical body. You have all these other makeup within yourself. So the other thing that's very important that the human body has is what they call its own electromagnetic force. Yeah, because you're made up of positive and negative ions as well. And these same electromagnetic forces, we also find them in nature. It's what causes weather storms and patterns and all the rest of it. So the word voodoo itself is also a reference to a human being. So a voodoo is not just, should we say, the Shangos or the Kabiasis or the other names that we have for forces of nature. A human being is also referred to as a voodoo because in African spiritual philosophy, we understand, and this is why we say the human being is not separate to nature. So, you know, again, voodoo or African spiritual knowledge systems was already aware of this knowledge before quantum science in this century has now, quote unquote, proven it. Because this is why that term voodoo is there. And it's not just in the voodoo tradition. For instance, in the Congo, the word Nzambi refers to the supreme being. And the same word in Nzambi, you can also refer to a human being. Yeah, so you can see that the African understands that they are not separate to the source of all creation, meaning you are the creator or God. And now you have quantum science proving the same, that we are planetary and elemental beings at the core rather than just a physical shell. So this is one of the first places we can already see that, yeah, there's nothing superstitious here. Perhaps the science, Western science, was the one that wasn't ready for their understanding, hence calling it superstition. The other interesting concept that we have is what we call the Big Bang, because the Big Bang in the Western science is these particles almost exploding together, creating an explosion, a mass of energy that then leads to the formation and creation of existence. The Congo, in their philosophy, they have what we call it a creation story. But then when we use words like creation story, we miss the real point of the African account. Because this is not like some Bible story where a woman is naked in a garden and she sees this talking snake and he gives them an apple. No, no, no. This is not one of these type of fables. Because the Congo story states that in the beginning there was this void, this dark void. And there are forces within the dark void, because even though the place is a void, there are active forces in there. And these forces create an explosion that brings forth creation. This is the Congolese creation story. So if you can hear such a story and you say that is superstition, but then you hear the Big Bang and it's coming from a person in a white coat who's in a laboratory, and you're going to say you believe that, as opposed to what exactly these Congolese, what was the discussion there? What was the discourse? Then you realize that your mind has been compromised because you're effectively hearing the same story. And that story doesn't just exist in the Congo. We can take it into Asian Africa. And the story, the Asian Kemetic story of how creation comes into being. Amen-Ra, which is the masculine aspect of what you call the creator, comes or takes a physical form after coming out of a void that is the mother. Yeah. So what you can see there, we're talking about a process of life coming into being, of creation It's not a fable. Yes, so we can see in the African accounts that there are scientific discussions going on, but because this knowledge has been so stigmatized and we've forgotten about it, we haven't really got to the core of what these ancestors were actually discussing.
Yeah.
You know, so those are the main two that I will put forward, so we can understand that we haven't fully yet understood that science. We're actually slowly understanding it now. You know, so those are the core two things, and also to remind us that Amen-Ra, as you can see, is the same word that Christians use at the end of their prayers. Amen, amen. Muslims use Amin, Amin. They're all calling an African deity, but then at the same time, they will still say this is evil and backward. But the affirmation word at the end of your prayer, you're calling an African God.
Okay, wow. Thanks a lot for this insight, for this deep insight. I'm also learning actually in this session. I'm learning as well today. And
just to add,
yes.
because we recently released a course looking specifically at these comparisons between these scientific concepts and the African discussion. So yeah.
I can, we can definitely recommend the courses and the documentaries. Everyone that is watching now, please head over afterwards and check it out. It's worth it. Yeah. And just on a short note regarding this, because it's something that I had a discussion with earlier this week. So when we talk about karma and this hexing that some people kind of talk about in African spirituality, you know, people can hex people, people can harm people, but at the same time, like the core of our spirituality is actually not teaching us to harm people, you know, because there's this law of karma. So how can we actually explain this karma thing that exists with the possibility to still harm people and hex people, you know, the connection there, just to make it able for people also to differentiate.
Yeah, very good question. Because a lot of people do say that, oh, you know, African spirituality is evil because people are doing hexes and stuff to each other. And so what we need to really make clear from the off is that people can misuse any spiritual knowledge for good or bad, whatever. That's separate, regardless from whatever spiritual tradition they choose to follow. What has happened is, because there has been so much stigmatization and people haven't been able to practice this tradition as it's supposed to be, people are not often informed of what the philosophies are. So as you correctly said, when you look into these philosophies, it is all about, you know, building your own character, understanding that everything in reality has a duality. So whatever you put out in the world, you will get back. That's the law of correspondence in play right there. So when we filmed Baba Credo Mutwa in South Africa for the Spirit is Eternal documentary, he said, you are not supposed to use this stuff for bad. Like, you're not supposed to. However, what's happened now is, and especially a lot of people who try to come into these traditions who are not even familiar with anything, all they want to do is, oh, teach me some rituals. I need to know how to do this. People come in with the wrong intentions. People often view African spirituality as a way just to have a quick fix to solutions. That's not what these philosophies are about. Ultimately, at core, they're about self-growth and development and connecting with the higher aspects of yourself through ancestral reverence, through connecting to the natural forces and creating that balance spiritually so that can reflect in your physical reality to obtain balance here. And so obviously, if you're going around doing bad stuff to people, that is not obtaining balance. That is causing negativity to someone else, which will ultimately find its way back to you. Now, I actually did a recent YouTube interview that covered this very same topic. And I spoke about, in my own experience, I've had a family member do some negativity to my family that has now filtered down to the children, meaning me and my siblings. And so that means that now becomes something that we need to heal and work through. And so what a lot of people don't realize is when they do these things, they don't understand it has an effect on them It has an effect on who you've done it to, and possibly even wider. So you don't know what can of worms you're opening spiritually for yourself. So for me, it's really important when we teach, we always make sure we speak about the philosophies as well as practices. Many people come in this with the wrong intention, the wrong heart, don't understand it fully. And that's where a lot of this negative consequence comes from. And unfortunately, ends up being a lot of work that people have to clear up to deal with the consequences that someone else has left.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
That's a good fact, I guess. Yeah, sometimes I just feel like speechless by what you are saying is so deep and so important to repeat, to reinforce the message. So thank you for that, guys.
Yeah.
If we have any beginners in this audience and this core or community, what would you actually advise to start with in terms of, I mean, apart from your course, which are absolutely brilliant, but if they want to start the journey into African spirituality, what would be one of the first steps that the person should take?
I would say the first step, and it's the first step I took personally, so this is why I would say that, is to start making a connection with your own ancestors. And so I strongly believe that regardless of whatever spiritual faith, religion, whatever you follow, that is such a key and important thing to do, because as I mentioned before, all of those ancestral memories, family members, lineage, all of that exists within you. In this very present incarnation, all of those existing lifetimes exist within you. So by calling upon your ancestors, reverencing them, is ultimately elevating yourself. It's activating parts of your DNA that have been lying dormant for so long. By doing that, you are elevating yourself. You now start to spiritually charge yourself, which enables you to become a lot more spiritually aware, to obtain higher levels of intuition. And also, once your intuition improves, then you are able to see more clearly. A lot more things become apparent. So if someone is not of good character, you can pretty much spot them easily. So it can help you in this life to actually avoid certain mistakes that you may have made previously. Also, through ancestral reverence, you can start calling on them for help and guidance and assistance in your daily life. And you will start to see certain doors and pathways open up in your reality as you start to see their intervention, which can happen in various ways. Now, you mentioned what would be the place to start. So ancestral reverence can be done by simply lighting a candle. You may wake up in the morning and light a candle in their honor and just call on them and invite them to be part of your day. Invite them to help you have the type of day you're trying to achieve, where you want to be productive and positive and complete all of your objectives for that day. Just do that. You can even pour libation, which is the act of pouring water to the ground, or you may even have a plant pot. You can symbolically pour the water there and make your prayer, make your invocations of what you are trying to achieve by calling on their names. And by doing the simple act, you will notice changes. And I will stress, you will notice changes. And so they will come to you in the form of spiritual communication. So people often ask, how does that appear? This can happen in so many different ways, through dreams. You may have like visions, insights, which is like real clarity of thoughts in your mind. You may find nature symbols, signs within nature. So you may start to see a particular animal or insect frequently. You may start overhearing conversations that are relevant to what you're currently going through in your life. Like, there is literally no end to how the communication takes place. But when it happens, you will know, because intuitively you will be like, what's going on here? This is a bit weird. What's going on? And then you start to question it. And the more it happens, you're like, I understand. I recognize. I see.
We are with us.
Exactly.
It's not the scary thing that we've all been taught that it is. It's actually much more subtle, a lot more natural, and very personal. Because what it does is, instead of looking to the world for answers, you now seek within yourself. And then you realize that your outer reality is a reflection of what's going on internally. So now when you do look outside, you see how it relates to you, and that's where you can find corresponding messages that tie into things that you are currently experiencing in your life.
Oh,
I actually have one quick question regarding the signs as soon as we start connecting with our ancestors. I've seen one comment, and someone was actually asking about, do we have a correlation between those series number that we can see, you know, this sign like 1111, 1010, etc. Is it actually also related to African spirituality? Do we have like a correlation, or I don't know?
I would say personally, when I first lit a candle in honor of my ancestors, I started to see the number 11. So I wouldn't say the number 11 is necessarily associated with African spirituality. What the point is they will use whatever means to get your attention. In my case, it was the number 11. And so because I kept seeing it like, I don't know, 8 times a day or whatever, whenever I looked at the clock, it was 11 minutes past the hour, whatever hour that would be. I saw it so much that that soon became my signal to say, something's at play here. There's no way I could keep seeing the same number everywhere. And so that's when I started to realize that's how they're communicating with me. And once I made that connection, then the communication starts to happen in all various forms. Now that communication was probably happening before anyway, but that particular number clearly stood out to me. And then I went online, looked it up, and I could see that it was tied into a lot of people who were receiving like spiritual awareness and kind of opening their mind. So clearly within this number 11, there is some sort of power. I know that symbolically it's like it represents a gateway. But would you have an African spiritual significance to number 11? I'm not.
I wouldn't say not just the number 11 itself. There's different, and again, you see, when we talk of numbers, we're dealing with abstractions of quantity. So, you know, it's not necessarily the number per se. The number is how it's written in English or the Anglo-Saxon way, but then it's the abstraction itself relates to the quantity of things. You know, I hold up this, you know, you're looking at 3 fingers. It's not the number 3 itself. We're just looking at a quantity of 3. And there's many quantities across African traditions. Like Oshun, for instance, resonates on the number 5. So what it is to do with on one level is it's a resonance, you know, because it's a means of communication, right? So what you need to have is in communication, someone speaks, someone receives the message, and then it goes back and forth. So this is the means by which that communication is made clear. You know, I think with also the double-digit numbers, you can also see that perhaps it could have a relation to the fact that as human beings, there's also at the simplest level 2 aspects to ourselves. Yeah, you have you, the physical body, and then you have you, the spiritual body. So we have this correlation in a sense reflecting back on ourselves. But then it's the means by which you can also recognize that there is something of, should we say, spiritual awareness that needs your attention. You know, so that's all it is really, in a key sense, because certain quantities carry a certain energy, not just 11. There's 9, there's 7, there's 3, because we can talk about the Trinity. For some people, you can even do 2, because you're dealing with a duality. You know, you have a physical and spiritual. So yeah, that's really one of the core behind these numerological exchanges. It's a funny word to say, hey.
And I also think it's kind of a way to start building the relationship also from their side, you know, like I think everyone that starts connecting gets different signals and different signs from their ancestors. And you kind of have your own kind of, you're building your own language and relationship with them. So speaking about that, maybe we can also get a little bit of insight about what made the both of you start your journey, and also maybe overcoming these doubts that you had maybe at the beginning, and where did your journey start?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead. Yeah, so my journey started Well, first of all, I grew up in what I would call a traditional Jamaican household. But I didn't, despite being it was actually a Christian household, even though my dad was atheist, but we did have a white Jesus on the wall. But I was never really into religion growing up. It didn't sit well with me. And as I got older, I started to look into different spiritual philosophies. I spent a long time being atheist because I was just like, this is rubbish. I'm not interested. They're not giving me anything that I believe. And then I got to a point where I started to get into sort of new age spirituality, where, you know, they're talking about these things like the number 11, law of attraction, all that kind of stuff. And I thought, oh, this is good. Like, this information resonates with me. I can see that there's some solid core knowledge, but at the same time, it just didn't sit well with me, because I was like, where are the black people at? Why are people like myself not represented? Like, where is that voice? And if we're talking about indigenous knowledge, then where is Africa? And so there's this always, whenever we talk about spirituality, there's always this fixation on Egypt, but neglecting the rest of the African continent. And I think for me, especially after I first read the Kabbalion, I think that's what blew my mind. And I was like, wow, this knowledge is really fascinating. Like, I can't believe this is what ancient knowledge is. And so that's what made me start to want to learn more about African spirituality, to find out what's going on in the rest of the continent. And as I was going through this process of even in being aware in my mind, I met someone who told me that I should be calling on my ancestors. So I was like, wow, this is new. I didn't know this was a thing. But I knew, as soon as I heard it, I knew it was something I needed to do. So I lit a candle. I called on my ancestors. I made a general petition call. A lot of people say, who should I call on? When I did this, I actually did a general call just to the ancestors. Said, I didn't know that I was supposed to be calling on you. I apologize. I'm so sorry. But please, you know, I invite you into my life. Please help and guide me along my journey. And it was literally maybe a week or two. And that's when the number 11 kicked in. And I kept seeing it all the time, to the point where I was like, I called it ancestor time, because I knew. And once, like, everything started to happen in stages and steps, as I mentioned, after I saw numbers, then I would get symbolism in other form. I used to see a lot of animals, particularly black animals, interestingly, like crows, ravens, bats, things like that, like black cats and stuff as well. And I kept realizing that it was them. And soon after that, I actually ended up meeting Dalian. And then we got into a conversation, and I found he was also on the same path. And I was like, wow, because up until this point, I never met people who were on this. Most people were scared the hell when I used to even bring up the conversation. They were looking at me like, why is she talking about this stuff? What's wrong with her? So to meet someone who was also on the same path, that also was reinforcing to me that once you start getting on your spiritual journey, you will become in alignment to those who are also of similar mindset and on that sort of same vibrational frequency. So that was my personal introduction to African spirituality.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, mine kind of started a bit, you know, I was born and raised in Ghana. So in Ghana, in the time growing up, I never met an African spiritual practitioner ever. You're either Christian or Muslim, you know. And in the Christian, we have so many different denominations, you know. They have what they call in Ghana Sum Sorry, which means the spiritual church, you know, as you may know. Because so my grandma took us to a few of those a couple of times growing up, but we were mainly Catholic. Whenever it was our mom's, in a sense, her turn, we always went to the Catholic church, you know. I went to Catholic school, went to Catholic secondary school. It was all of that, you know, received all the rites of passage and, you know, communion, confirmation, all the rest of it. And then my grandma passed when I was 11. And, you know, I'm named after my grandma. So my name is Yao. Her name is Ya. She has the female component. So I was named after her. So mine is Nana Yao, meaning I'm named after my grandmother. So after I finished high school, I spent a period at home kind of restudying to take some more of my papers. And I just, it's like it's almost like a knock in your mind. You know, you can feel an impression. Some people might feel like what they call little chills in their body, whatnot. Mine, it was like a conversation in the mind. And I knew who I was having this conversation with, because it wasn't me, it wasn't my own thoughts. But then I realized, okay, I have a kind of a visit from my grandmother, so you know, we should encourage this conversation. And there was also lots of things that I wanted from my grandmother, because she would always do everything for me when she was alive. So I thought, okay, I can transfer this to this sense I'm getting from her still. At this point, this is about 5-6 years after her death. So I didn't know the means or the tools, but because obviously I'd been going to Catholic church, I kind of knew what the formula for praying was. And I knew what was in a church. So, you know, I lit a candle, and then I wrote like what I wanted to say on a piece of paper. And that's how I began that communication. And that communication then also fed back to me, you know, because I remember even when I wrote my request, after the request for the conversation, I would then pray some of the bits on the rosary, you know, because that's the only thing I knew, is this is how you pray. But then as the relationship then develops, all of those other, if you want to call them syncretic forms, because those parts are put in there because I was ignorant of what the traditional ways were. Nobody had ever taught me. You mentioned that where they'll take you to some church and beat whatever they think is in you the hell out of you, you know? So yeah, for me, I just trusted in the nature of the communication, because I knew the energy that I was communicating with, and that person was my own grandmother. So there was no need for me to fear. And the relationship just blossomed, because the instructions just started coming. This is what you need to use when you want to pray or invoke, because we don't pray, we invoke. We affirm for reality to mold or to change. You know, that's what you do in the African tradition. So all of these things were fed to me almost, you know, because that's what it is. Your ancestor is the person that trains you and teaches you how to live, how to behave. When you're in the physical realm, you know, they teach you your manners. So in spirit too, they can teach you spiritual manners, as it were. Yeah, and my practice just evolved over time and continues to. At one point when I met Verona, I had a snakeskin rug in my house, and it was a circular snakeskin rug.
What did you have? Sorry? A
snakeskin. Yeah, that I bought in Ghana. So again, I was in Ghana on holiday, and I just got drawn to that mat. I went to the Arts and Cultural Center and said, yeah, that one. You know, so you have to learn, and it will come to you, because you start to realize what are your thoughts versus what are communications. That one, no one can teach you that. You have to start, you will get more discerning at separating the two. Yeah. Yeah. It's part of your developmental power, if you will, or your part of your spiritual developmental power, because as you're in that space, your consciousness primes itself and also gives you further instructions. Yeah. So when I met Verona, at that time, I was actually studying Buddhism. I was going to the West London Buddhist temple, because again, even though like I had treated my relationship with my grandmother almost as a personal one, so it didn't stop me from exploring other traditions. You know, I learned a bit about Islam. I was a student of the Deen for quite a while, close to 2 years. But then I was like, nah, this sounds too much like Christianity, because if I'm leaving Catholicism, why am I going to replace it with just another version? Just you change the thing. So then I read into Hinduism quite a lot. Then it took me to the Buddhist temple. And then in the Buddhist temple, when they were talking about the teachings of the Buddha, the Eightfold Path, I was like, these are 8 African proverbs. I've heard them before, but not said in the same way. So let me go back to source. And this is where me and Verona had conversations, and Ancestral Voices was born.
Someone's asking, what was the snakeskin?
Oh, what was it for? So on Sundays, you know, it was a circle. It was a circular map. So on Sundays, again, you know, you look or you think back and you realize why. Because even that circular shape of the rug, I would come to find later, is a very key shape in African spiritual philosophy. Because pretty much everything in the world comes from a spherical shape. Yeah, whether you look at the moon, the planets, the cells in your body, it's woman's womb. Yeah, it's all circular shapes. But I saw the mat and something said, get this and sit on it. You know, so now instead of before I would make like circles with ash and be in the circle, because the circle is like your space that you create. You know, you think of it as, yeah, this is your God moment. In that circle, you're creating life, because as a being of energy, the energy you're given in that space is very powerful. So I bought that mat and I would sit on it. I didn't need to make a circle anymore, because I was sitting on a circle, and it was a snake skin, and snakes are known for the ability to transform. This is why snakes are one of the key. It's one of the signifiers of the creator, because the snake sheds its skin, is always in a state of transformation, very much like a human being. But at that time, I didn't know any of that. I was just listening to the guidance. I saw it, I felt something about it, and I got it. This is how we have to trust ourselves on the spiritual journey. Too many people, you hear them, oh, you know, I did one libation today. I was expecting my world to have changed by tomorrow. I'll wake up in a big... No, it doesn't work like that. That's just you need to develop yourself over time. You understand? And most important, you need to trust yourself, because we're too scared of making mistakes. We want everything to be perfect every time. Do you know what I mean? And as I said, if you think of me starting invocation rituals with a Catholic rosary and a piece of paper, which is like almost like one of these self-help techniques, you know, vision board, all the rest of it, to going into snake skins, to then doing other things, to now where there's a whole heap of other things. That's development. That's spiritual growth. And you have to be trusting in yourself that even your mistake is leading you to the right place. This is one of the core things. If you cannot have confidence and belief in your ability, you find it very difficult in African spirituality, because sometimes the messages will bombard you so much, you can confuse yourself. But you need to have that serious trust in the fact that you're walking on the right path.
Wow. And one thing I just heard by both of you telling your stories is you were really on like the same journey. Like you were both looking into Buddhism and then asking yourself these questions, and then kind of your journeys crossed at the divine time, I guess. So wow, thanks for sharing that. Definitely. So it's definitely
Dalian was looking into Buddhism. I was the New Age one.
New Age one, okay.
I guess New Age, it seems more Buddhism than anything.
Yeah, interesting. No, thanks for sharing, definitely. So, yeah. Grace, I see you want to say something.
Yes, I might have one more question. It's basically, so while I was actually listening to your story, somehow it just reminded me like my nephew when he was little, very newborn, you know, probably not newborn, but after 6 months, or probably 6 months, something like that. I can see from him, he was actually feeling and interacting with probably spirit. So, and I heard that kids until a certain age can actually communicate with spirit. So I like to have more insight on this. I know it's still related to the topic, but I'm just curious about it and would like to get more information about that.
So sorry, can you just repeat the question? More information on what?
Children are spiritually.
Okay. Yeah, so the people that we've come across in our research who have spoken about this the most would be Maladoma and Subonfu Some from the Dagara people of Burkina Faso. And in their work, they have spoken a lot about, in the Dagara tradition, children are seen to be closer to the spiritual realm because they literally just came from there. And as you get older, because you're about to go back to the spiritual realm, you're also quite close as well. So that's why they're saying there's a very unique relationship that takes place between the elderly and children, because even though they seem on the physical plane, they're extreme ends of scale on the scale of age, but in terms of their knowledge and understanding, they are very close to each other. So this is why we see in our physical life, I'm sure we've all had experiences of children who have a high level of spiritual awareness. So it normally will manifest itself as the child saying they have some invisible friend, and we're like, who is this person you're speaking to? And they're like, they're over there, this is my friend. And we're looking at them thinking, okay, you know, you have an active imagination, where what it is they have the ability to see beyond what we can see in this sort of 3D reality. So it's really important as well for us, once we do start acknowledging this kind of African spiritual knowledge, is to recognize this within our children and not to dismiss what they're saying or just put it down to them being young and simple. Well, no, actually, they can be very aware. So I'll give a personal example. I remember when my brother's, my nephew, my brother's child, he was young, my nephew, he used to go around the house saying, this is the nice man, this is the nice man. And my brother was like, okay, he keeps going about this nice man every single day. All right, it is what it is. He didn't take him seriously, just dismissed him. And then one day he was going through a family album, and the family member came up and he was like, that's the nice man, that's the nice man. And this family member had been died for like a good 20 odd years. But the child was like, that's who it is. That's who's been talking to me. That's who comes to the house. So it just goes to show that children are very spiritually in tune. They have that level of awareness. So it's really important that we respect and honor that within them to kind of keep it alive within them. So a lot of them grow out of it because it is suppressed once they come into this reality here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for this insight. Yeah.
I think I just have one more question, because I was so many questions we have. When I also started kind of calling onto my ancestors or praying to them, starting to connect, especially after watching your documentary, I have to say again, it changed a lot in the practice and my spiritual practice, I must say. And but what I also learned that you should, if you connect, call on the good and well ancestors. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that for people that want to start. You know, it's like just be considerate about who you call and not just anyone.
Yeah, no, that is a very important question, and really I'm gonna answer in the simplest and the best way I've heard so far. And then I'll add a bit of context, because the way Sobon Fusome said it, this is when I first met her in Harvard University, and she was giving a talk, and she said that, you know, all of your ancestors are very important, because the minute we take one out of the equation, there's no more you. Do you understand?
Yeah.
One ancestor not there where they're supposed to be, there's no more you. Now, what she says is that, well, there's different types of ways you can just venerate and remember your ancestors anyway. Yeah. For those whose assistance you seek, you invoke, meaning you invite them to share, right? So when you invoke, you're opening doors. So yeah, obviously, if you have an ancestor who you know was a serial killer or a mass murderer, and you are invoking that essence, then what you're asking for is to say you want to develop those kind of qualities, right? So then obviously you can't invoke such a person with such a consciousness. However, she then also says that there's just the I guess appreciation. Because if this person's gene pool wasn't in your gene pool, you wouldn't be here. So at the very least, you owe them life. So saying just thank you to all my ancestors is fine. But then invoking and saying, okay, I want this one, can you assist me with by, and when I say invoking, you're also calling them by name. So you're then being specific, because let's be real. How many of our ancestors do we know beyond, let's say, if we're lucky, a great-grandparent? So you don't know what hardly a majority of your ancestors have done, or even were the type of people. So however, what you can do then is you make that distinction when you're in that place of ritual. You know, because the question Sobonfu asked, which I think is still relevant, and I ask it quite often now, is how do you know if you were in the ancestor's shoes, you would have lived your life any different? So it's all good and well to be very judgmental, but how do you know you would have done any better? So, you know, we, just like the human being, we're composed of good and bad, or good, evil, and we choose which one we allow to be our key functioning system. You know, so you will have positive or negative ancestors. You can just appreciate them and say thank you. But then the ones that you know are of a certain quality that you would want in your experience, then you can get to invoke it. You know, even that person that you invoke, you don't know their skeletons in their closet either, do you? So I think if we work off the theme of appreciation, and then we just specifically invoke those ones that we are comfortable with, we won't have a problem. But yeah, this idea of bad, not so good ancestors, since I heard Sobonfu explain that point, I haven't really, in a sense, made it a sticking point for me, you know?
And that's what I'm saying. And just to add to that, one more thing I would say that for those who are concerned about maybe so-called calling in so-called negative ancestors, one thing I would also recommend is just working on yourself. So making sure that within yourself you maintain a high level of character, a high level of vibration, keep your space cleansed and cleared, keep your vibrational frequency high, because as long as you're operating on a higher vibrational frequency anyway, then you're not going to be able to attract those lower vibrations. They won't be able to be in your space. So keep yourself elevated, and therefore you will attract ancestral knowledge that will be of benefit for you.
Wow, that was so helpful. So I have something to change in terms of like calling in and thanking. That this difference is so new for me. So for myself in my spiritual practice, something will change now. Thank you so much. Yeah. Wow.
Yes.
And I think before we end up the call, I mean, the conversation is just amazing. People are just loving it, and everything that you are seeing resonates with them, with us as well. We have so much gratitude for that.
Yeah.
We know that the audience and the community, even myself and Biko, we love having some recommendation regarding books that we can read, podcasts, any other Instagram account, or any resources that can help us actually to, in addition to the conversation, can help to grow.
Yeah, no.
Well, so we have a range of learning resources on our website, not just Ancestral Voices products, but we also have a page on our article section that says recommended reading. So for those who wanted to see who we've been researching from and getting our knowledge base from, we have a page on our website there. So for first anyone who's new, I would definitely recommend our free 5-day home study, our free 5-day e-course, which you know, breaks down a lot of what we've discussed today, including our own personal journeys, overcoming fear, you know, the science and spirituality and how it can be implemented for benefits in our life. So that's covered in our free 5-day e-course. I know that Biko also mentioned earlier that our documentary has been helpful to you. So we do have a home study course that includes both of our documentaries and the book, which is also very informative and gives a lot of foundation knowledge as well as ritual practices that people can implement in their lives if they want to start going on this journey. For those who would like, we also have Dalian's new transformative self course. So for those who are really interested in the scientific side and, you know, understanding quantum science versus African spirituality, and for those people who are still under this conception that this is spookism and not based in any form of science, that will definitely debunk that. So that's called transformative self. But yeah, literally everything is on our website, www.ancestralvoices.co.uk. And last but not least, for those who just want to learn about the different references we've used for our researches over the years, then on our articles page, there's a page called recommended reading.
About on the articles page as well, we also have a free download for the book, because the recommendations, we have a bibliography that you can download. It's at the back of the book. Yeah, it's free. It's a free book download. There's at least 60 listed books, and all those books are useful. So, you know, just download it. It's a free PDF, and go to the bibliography, and you can read everything there. And then you pick which ones you feel most drawn to start off with. But the one book that is, and it's even over recommended to a degree, is Malidoma Some's book of Water and Spirit.
Yes.
The reason why I'll recommend that book again, because it's, first of all, it's a very easy read, and you know, you're reading the journey of someone who's a PhD student now saying that he's going to become an African shaman, if you will. I think for most people, you know, one of the key things is because of the way our minds have been locked, we have to use the things that we've been forced to believe in to break the lie. So you can't see someone who's gone that high at a PhD level, then understanding themselves even better through their spiritual traditions. It changes your mind of ideas about education, about what is civilized or what is not. Yeah, and then it's a very relatable story. So that's a very first, I would say, recommended book for anyone to read who's totally new. But those who have other bits, you know, look through the bibliography. 60 books plus, you can knock yourself out. You know,
Yes.
There's loads of, So that's the recommendation.
Thank you. And on that note, because she was in your documentary as well, and on that note, I will say a huge thank you, because she said something of where to start when to look for your life purpose, to start with your name. And I did this research, and in that moment, and I just felt that that I'm on the right path, and I got this vision of what my life purpose is. So it was through your documentary, actually. Yeah. So a huge thank you for that. Yeah.
No problem, man. No problem. You know, inspire someone else to find theirs, man.
Exactly.
That's the whole, you know.
Exactly.
I'm happy to share that. Yes.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I think we are coming to an end already. To wrap it up,
Wow.
I don't know whether Grace you had. What did you say, sir?
So that went really quickly.
Right. No, it was such a great conversation, honestly, with so much details. Obviously, there is so much more. This topic is huge. But I hope it can get people a starting point or an insight of where to start. So for everyone who wants to know more, head over to the website. There are so many resources. Watch the documentary, honestly, it's amazing. Check out the courses. Also, check out our Beetrive community Instagram. This month is our spirituality month. And we have a whole app coming up for the Black community, something we need to emphasize. So we are developing an app at the moment for all of us to come together.
I thought we would tell the audience more about Beetrive as well. So
yeah, shall we? Grace, you want to start?
Yeah.
Grace, you want to start?
If we have the time, why not?
Yeah, definitely. So Beetrive is managed by Biko and myself. We are co-founder and co-CEO. This is a social educational platform where we want to unify the Black community and give actually an opportunity to have a safe space for us to be able to come together and doing exactly what we have done tonight, having an open chat about spirituality, history, culture, lifestyle, well-being, Black excellence, and so on. So make sure to follow our page, to register to the waiting list, to be one of the first members to Beetrive. Yeah.
To use the app, definitely. And one thing also to emphasize is one of the key ideas is that the ancient ways are the key to our future. So it's really about going back to the knowledge of our ancestors, because as Dalian and Verona really emphasized and mentioned, it lives within all of us. It's going back, recognizing this knowledge within us, learning about it, using it to where we are now to inspire upward mobility, because we can do it, and we have the power within ourselves and within the community to come together in unity to create solutions for ourselves. And this is the time. So get registered on our waiting list, and we can't wait to meet you all there. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you so much, all.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, great conversation, and we will hopefully find another appointment to do another live again. And until then, stay tuned all. Okay.
You guys,
thank you.
There's so many comments. I want to go back and check, but thank you for your involvement and being present. We love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.